Hey, and welcome to another video. Today this Tech Talk is going to test GoPro Hero 8 camera settings and their impact on battery life. The tests are as controlled as I could get them. I marked each camera with a color and each battery with a letter. The batteries are marked only so that I intentionally mix which battery goes into which camera. It's a simple controlled method testing with accounting for variable impacts and attempting to offset. Cameras are also rotated so that one camera is not always testing the upper range or the lower range scenario of that test. Basically, we're mixing it up today. Worth noting is one camera is a month and a half old of me owning it, having purchased it brand new, and two other cameras I picked up over the weekend, brand new as well. So cameras and batteries are all new and essentially extremely close, if not equal, in their lifespan. Continuing to minimize factors, I did have to decide on locked camera video settings. These would not change throughout each test and across each camera. So I selected the primary GoPro video presets I use most often, 4K 60. Understand that video quality and resolution will certainly have the largest impact on battery life, but the tests today are using the same profile and therefore targeting only the setting change specific to said test. Hint hint, there will be another video where I test the setting changes with environmental variants, but that will be after testing and choosing the optimal settings coming out of this video. That said, if you shoot different video quality frame rates, it's perfectly fine to review these tests and make any changes you see fit to your usage and user experience. I'll say up front, the battery difference between my new default setting as well as all high values was only about 6 minutes of extra camera life. While that could scale across batteries in a single day to say 18 extra recording minutes for say 3 batteries, one of the differences which I feel is more important is the camera operating temperature. This can be a huge factor on a warm sunny day to avoid overheating the GoPro, as well as the overall lifespan of the GoPro and battery. Heat is the number one enemy of electronics next to static. Before I give all the test results away, let's look at the video profile I used for the tests for each camera. Here are the video settings as mentioned earlier, 4K 60 FPS. This is what I shoot 90% of my content in, lens is linear, hypersmooth is on, bitrate is high, and white balance is auto. I shoot ISO max at 400 to minimize noise, with sharpness set to medium. I also use the GoPro color setting. I don't shoot with raw audio as I can extract and post if I need the separation. I'm happy enough with the GoPro audio quality in non-RAW, along with the wind set to auto. Now with some presets I do let ISO go as high as 1600. That's just dependent on the scenery, the lighting, and really is more uncommon than common. It's important to understand the test results are meant for informational purposes and really my curiosity. At the end I will share the settings I intend to keep long-term and why I chose those settings. If you have to record a session non-stop for as long as you possibly can, then really you should ignore anything here and simply plug your camera in. Battery shouldn't matter in that type of situation as you should be running the camera off of wall power or a portable USB charge pack. These settings are really meant for being on the go. For all the tests today, each camera recorded the same video and same audio. I played a playlist from my channel and don't intend to copyright strike myself. Playing video ensured the cameras were recording some form of motion. However, note that the cameras themselves were stationary, so hypersmooth processing impact is low to non-existent. I would have to think that performing all the same tests with the cameras moving would reduce the length of recording time. I personally feel this aligns with my point earlier in the selection of a video profile. Since all cameras were in the same position and given the same task, the common variable should be the setting tested only. Thus, I firmly believe this is a valid controlled environment to test in. But this furthers my reason to perform a second round of testing, after implementing the settings coming out of this video. The second round will be settings such as raw audio, hypersmooth, bitrate, color profile, things of that nature. Lastly, before we look at the final results, all tests were performed where the cameras first had their settings set for their upcoming test. Batteries were then pulled and charged to 100%, and then reinserted and the test began. This was to minimize any menu navigation impacting battery usage. All cameras started their test at the moment of power on. Now I did have a timer running with each test, but I'm not going for timer accuracy during the test. The timer was there only as a trigger reminder for me. The comparisons were more about each camera's battery at a shared point in time. The timer only mattered in the final test where the winning settings were carried forward to one camera, then compared with one camera with all low settings, and the final camera having all upper values. Enough talking though, let's take a look at the results. Before we start, note that the video in the background is the last 8 minutes of the final test. Okay, so the first test was touchscreen brightness, and this result surprised me the most. I really expected there to be more separation between the green camera set to 10% and the blue camera set to 100%. For this test, I called it when all cameras fell below the 50% mark, and I continued that for all my tests. As you can see in this test, there was only a 3% difference at that point. Now, prior to starting the test, I did intend to run batteries to 0%, but I tracked battery percent loss at a consistent decline during the test, and I also knew that during the final test, I would discharge all batteries to 100%. So back to this test. For brightness, I'm going to be setting my GoPros at 10%. While the battery life between 10 and 50% brightness showed no difference, my decision is also factoring in camera operating temperature, but more on this during the final test discussion. The second battery test covered the beep sound. Camera 1 was muted, camera 2 at low, and camera 3 at high. Not tested was the medium beep sound. There was hardly any difference during this test, and it was simply annoying to go through. I set for 20 minutes clicking the mode cycle button on the new remote just to produce the beep sound, as well as having to take multiple photos, one after the other. Thus, I ended the test at the 20-minute mark. This test also brought to light that occasionally the GoPro dual battery charger would indicate batteries were green, meaning fully charged, but the batteries were not actually topped off consistently. If I didn't let the batteries charge past their full indication, then sometimes they would drop percentage during camera power on from 100% down to 98%, just something I noted. If I charged the battery in the GoPro, however, I didn't see this behavior. I won't get into the voltage and amps difference between those charge methods, but I'm certain that was the reason for the behavior I was seeing. So ending that side rant, I went ahead with the test and gave the green camera a 2% handicap, as I expected a little variance for the remainder of the test. And I was right. At a 1% difference, and given the unrealistic amount of sounds I was forcing the camera to make, far exceeding what a real-world single battery charge would do, I can say, in my opinion, the beep volume setting has less than a 1 to 2% battery impact. So now on to the next test, before the GoPro beep sound becomes a phantom thing that I hear the remainder of my life. The third test was LEDs, with camera 1 set to all LEDs off, camera 2 set to front off only, and camera 3 set to all LEDs on. There is no difference here, and that is not surprising. No sense in wasting time, but I will say that if you want people to know you're recording them, well, keep on blinking. Otherwise, go stealth while still waving around a GoPro. A pro tip, though, with the LEDs off, the camera won't be as obvious in the... Never mind. The fourth test was screen timeout. I think during this test I found out that the 30% brightness setting is the sweet spot, because at a 2-minute difference between green camera 1 and blue camera 3, I would have expected some separation in battery drain, but there wasn't. During the test, I started a recording, and it ran for 3 minutes, till the last display timed out, at which point I stopped the recording and started it back again 30 seconds later. This basically gave very little off time to the camera set for a 3-minute timeout. So the takeaway here is screen brightness seems to matter more than the amount of time which the display is active. And with that, now we can move on to the fifth and final test. This last test was taking what I felt were the optimal settings from the prior tests and configuring those on GoPro 1. Then GoPro 2 has all the lower setting options. Now, because display brightness was the same lowest setting for GoPro 1 and 2, I did choose to set the timeout for GoPro 2 to 2 minutes, up from 1 minute. There needed to be some differentiation between those two cameras. Then GoPro 3 was the workhorse and had all high settings, but given the circumstances, it actually performed really well. This has me anxious for my next video, as I'm left to assume that video settings are going to have a much bigger role on battery impact. For the test here though, we see a difference of around 5 minutes. The reality is I would need to repeat this final test 2 or 3 more times and then take averages, but having said that, I'm going to close out this general settings test with the following remarks. Set your GoPro up for the best user experience. Don't fret over small red blinking lights and not wanting to turn on your display to check your shot because you're concerned about the battery. Have spare batteries and swap out as appropriate. All in all, I think the heat impact to the components, which will likely result in more frequent overheating, is the outlying factor in a 10-degree difference. So due to that, I'm going to run my settings low in what I consider to be optimal. Honestly, 10% display brightness is enough to frame your shot, and that is the screen's purpose in my opinion. And that's going to do it for the video today, guys and gals. Let me know your thoughts and comments. Was there more I could have tested, or maybe tested a different way? I plan to use a similar format for the next testing video while also introducing environment variables. As always, get out, go do what makes you happy. We'll see you on the next one.